Hello, everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
The birthday I didn't want. Have you ever woken up on a day that was supposed to be special and felt absolutely nothing? No excitement, no joy, no anticipation, just a heavy emptiness that sat in your chest like a stone, reminding you that you were alone. That no one cared, that you didn't matter? That was me, on the morning of my birthday, 3 years into living in America. I remember that morning so clearly. The California sun was streaming through the window, the birds were singing, and my children were already awake, running around the house. It should have been a beautiful day. It was my birthday, after all. But I didn't want to celebrate. I didn't want to acknowledge it. Because acknowledging my birthday would mean acknowledging how lonely I was, how invisible I had become, how far I was from the life I used to have. In my country, birthdays were everything. My mother would wake me up with a special breakfast. My father would give me a small gift wrapped in colorful paper. And my siblings would sing happy birthday off-key, making me laugh so hard I couldn't breathe. But here, in America, there was none of that. My mother was thousands of miles away, my father was gone, and my siblings were scattered across the world. The phone would ring later that day, I knew. My mother would call, and I would put on my happy voice and tell her I was fine, that I was enjoying my day, that everything was wonderful. And I would be lying. Because the truth was, I had convinced myself that no one here cared about me enough to celebrate me. I had been living in this country for 3 years, and in that time, I had made exactly 0 real friends. I had acquaintances, sure. Coworkers I chatted with. Neighbors I waved to. But no one who would go out of their way to show me they cared. And that hurt more than I wanted to admit. So I did what I always did when something hurt. I pretended it didn't. I told myself that birthdays were silly, that I was too old for celebrations, that it was just another day. I even told my husband that I didn't want a party. I don't celebrate birthdays, I said, with a dismissive wave of my hand. He looked at me with those eyes that saw through everything, but he didn't push. He just nodded and said, "Okay, sweetheart. Whatever you want." And I thought I was safe. I thought I had escaped the possibility of disappointment. I thought I had protected myself from the pain of being forgotten. But what I didn't realize was that my husband had a secret. A secret that was about to explode my carefully constructed walls and teach me the most important lesson about love and belonging I had ever learned. And it all started with a trip to work that morning, completely unaware of the surprise waiting for me. A small white lie. Have you ever told a lie to protect yourself, not realizing that the lie was actually hurting you more than the truth ever could? You convince yourself you're being safe, you're being strong, you're being smart, but really, you're just building a wall between yourself and the people who want to love you. That was me, standing in my kitchen, about to tell my husband the biggest lie of our marriage. It was 2 weeks before my birthday. My husband had been dropping hints all week. "What do you want to do for your birthday this year?" he would ask. "Any special plans? Anything you've been wanting?" And every single time, I would smile, that fake, practiced smile I had perfected, and say, "Oh, I don't really celebrate birthdays." They're not important to me. It was a lie. A complete and total lie. Birthdays were incredibly important to me. In my country, birthdays were a huge deal. Family would gather, food would be prepared, and everyone would make sure the birthday person felt loved and celebrated. But here, in America, I didn't have that. I didn't have my family. I didn't have a big group of friends. I barely knew anyone. And the thought of celebrating a birthday alone, with no one to share it with, was too painful to even think about. So I did what I always did. I pretended I didn't care. I told myself that birthdays were silly, that they were for children, that I was too old and too busy to worry about such things. But deep inside, I was hurting. I was hurting because I missed my family. I was hurting because I felt invisible. I was hurting because I had convinced myself that no one cared about me enough to celebrate me. My husband, of course, didn't believe me. He knew me too well to fall for my act. But instead of pushing me, he just nodded and said, "Okay, sweetheart. Whatever you want." And I felt a wave of relief mixed with sadness. Relief that he wasn't going to force me to face my loneliness. And sadness that I had just pushed away the one person who was trying to love me. Psychologists call this self-sabotage. It's when we push away the things we want most because we're afraid we don't deserve them. We reject love before it can reject us. We hide before we can be ignored. And I was a master at it. But here's the thing about self-sabotage, it's exhausting. It takes so much energy to pretend you don't care. It takes so much energy to build walls. It takes so much energy to lie to the people who love you. And eventually, the walls you build to protect yourself become the prison that keeps you trapped. That week, I went to work, I came home, I took care of my kids, and I pretended that my birthday didn't exist. I was so convincing that I almost believed it myself. But then, something happened. Something I never expected. Something that would completely shatter the lie I had been telling myself and everyone around me. The office surprise. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the air shift, felt that something was different, that everyone knew something you didn't? That feeling when you're the only one not in on the secret, and your brain starts racing, trying to figure out what's happening. While your heart pounds so loudly you're sure everyone can hear it? That was me, walking into my office on the morning of my birthday, completely unaware that my entire world was about to flip upside down. It was a regular Tuesday. Or so I thought. I walked into the office, coffee in hand, already planning my boring day of spreadsheets and emails. The office was quiet, which was normal for that time of day. But as I walked toward my cubicle, I noticed something strange. People were looking at me. Smiling. Whispering. I felt a prickle of anxiety crawl up my spine. Had I done something wrong? Was I in trouble? Did I have spinach in my teeth? I smiled awkwardly and kept walking, trying to pretend I hadn't noticed. And then, I rounded the corner to my cubicle, and my brain completely short-circuited. My cubicle was covered in decorations. Balloons. Streamers. A sign that said "Happy Birthday" in big, colorful letters. and on my desk there was a cake. A beautiful chocolate cake with candles already lit. I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, staring at this beautiful, impossible scene, feeling like I was dreaming. And then, everyone in the office started singing. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Their voices filled the room. I looked around at their faces, my coworkers, the people I barely knew, the people I had been too scared to talk to because of my broken English. They were all smiling at me. They were all singing to me. For me. And I felt the tears start to fall before I could stop them. Hot, embarrassing tears streaming down my face. I tried to wipe them away, but they just kept coming. Someone handed me a tissue. Someone else handed me the cake knife. And my boss, a tall woman named Lisa who I had always been terrified of, walked over and hugged me. Happy birthday, she said. We're so glad you're here. And in that moment, I realized something that shattered every belief I had about myself. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't alone. I wasn't forgotten. These people, these Americans with their perfect English and their easy confidence, they had noticed me. They had remembered my birthday. They had gone out of their way to make me feel special. And I had never felt more seen in my entire life. My brain couldn't process it. I had spent 3 years convincing myself that no one cared, that I didn't matter, that I was invisible. And in one single moment, a cubicle full of balloons and a chocolate cake had proven everything I believed was wrong. But the surprise wasn't over yet. Not even close. Because my coworkers had one more thing to tell me. And what they said made my heart stop completely. Why I cried at work. Have you ever cried in front of people and felt so embarrassed that you wanted to disappear? Your face is red, your nose is running, your eyes are puffy, and everyone is staring at you. And you just want the ground to open up and swallow you whole? That was me, standing in my cubicle, surrounded by balloons and coworkers, crying like a baby and completely unable to stop. I couldn't stop crying. The tears just kept coming. My coworkers were looking at me with concern, probably wondering if they had done something wrong. But they hadn't. They had done everything right. The problem was me. I had spent so many years holding everything in, pretending I was fine, pretending I didn't need anyone. Pretending that I was strong and independent and didn't care about things like birthdays. And now, all that pretending had come crashing down in a single moment of kindness. Lisa, my boss, handed me another tissue and said, "Are you okay? Did we upset you?" I shook my head, trying to speak through the tears. No. No. I'm just. I didn't expect this. I didn't think anyone would remember. And then I told them something I had never told anyone before. I told them that I had been living in America for 3 years, and I had never felt like I belonged. I told them that my English wasn't perfect, and I was always scared of making mistakes, so I just stayed quiet. I told them that I had convinced myself that no one cared about me, so I stopped caring about myself. The room was silent. And then, something amazing happened. My coworkers started sharing their own stories. Lisa told me about moving to America from Mexico when she was 18, and how she cried every day for the first year. Another coworker, Mark, told me about feeling invisible in high school because he was the only Asian kid in his class. Another woman, Rachel, told me about her divorce and how she thought she would never feel loved again. And as they shared their stories, I realized something powerful. I wasn't the only one who had ever felt invisible. I wasn't the only one who had ever felt like they didn't belong. I wasn't the only one who had ever been scared of being seen. This moment, this beautiful office surprise, had done something more than just celebrate my birthday. It had opened a door. It had created a connection. It had shown me that I wasn't alone in my loneliness. And that was the most beautiful gift of all. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. At the end of the day, as I was packing up to go home, Lisa pulled me aside and said, "Your husband called us last week. He asked us to do this. He said you would try to say you didn't want a party, but he knew you needed one." My heart stopped. My husband. The man I had lied to. The man I had pushed away. He hadn't believed me. He had seen through my lie. And he had gone behind my back to make sure I felt loved anyway. I walked out of the office that day, not just with a new understanding of my coworkers, but with a new understanding of the man I had married. And when I got home, I realized the surprise was only just beginning. My husband's secret. What if the person you trusted the most was keeping the biggest secret of all? Not a secret that would hurt you, but a secret that would heal you? A secret that would prove, beyond any doubt, that you were loved more than you could possibly imagine? That was the realization that hit me like a wave as I drove home from work, still clutching the tissue from my office surprise. My mind racing with questions about what my husband had done. The drive home was a blur. My mind was spinning with everything that had happened. The decorations. The cake. The singing. The stories my coworkers had shared. And Lisa's words echoing in my head, "Your husband called us last week. He asked us to do this." I couldn't believe it. My husband, the man I had lied to, the man I had pushed away. The man I had told that I didn't want a birthday celebration, had gone behind my back to make sure I felt loved anyway. I felt so many emotions at once. Confusion. Gratitude. Guilt. Shame. I had tried so hard to push him away, to protect myself from disappointment, and he had refused to let me. He had seen through my walls, my lies, my fake indifference, and he had decided to love me anyway. I walked through the front door of our house, still in a daze. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kids were at school. My husband was. I didn't know where he was. I called out his name. No answer. I walked through the living room, the kitchen, the hallway. And then, I saw it. On the dining room table, there was a small envelope with my name on it. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a card. The front of the card said, "To the woman I love." And inside, my husband had written, "I know you said you didn't want a party. But I also know you lie when you're scared. So I planned something anyway. And I hope you'll forgive me." I felt tears streaming down my face again. But this time, they were different tears. Not sad tears. Not overwhelmed tears. They were grateful tears. Tears of realizing that I had been loved all along, even when I didn't feel it. I looked around the house, trying to figure out what he had done. And then, I heard a noise from the backyard. I walked to the back door, opened it, and stepped outside. And what I saw made my heart stop. The backyard was transformed. String lights hung from the trees. Tables were covered with beautiful tablecloths. A giant banner hung on the fence that said, "Happy Birthday." And standing in the middle of it all, surrounded by our neighbors, our friends, and our children, was my husband. He was holding a cake. And everyone started singing. Again. But this time, it was different. This time, I wasn't confused or overwhelmed. I was home. I was seen. I was loved. And I finally understood that celebrations aren't just about cake and decorations. They're about connection. They're about community. They're about showing the people you love that they matter. And in that moment, I realized that I had been wrong about everything. I did matter. I had always mattered. I had just been too scared to believe it. A party I never expected. Have you ever felt like you were standing in the middle of a dream, watching yourself live a life that didn't feel like yours? Like you were watching a movie where the main character finally got everything she ever wanted, but you couldn't quite believe it was real? That was me, standing in my backyard, surrounded by twinkling lights and smiling faces, feeling like I had stepped into someone else's beautiful life. The backyard was magical. String lights hung from the trees like tiny stars, casting a warm glow over everything. Tables were covered with colorful tablecloths, filled with food I hadn't cooked or food that my husband and neighbors had prepared together. A giant banner that said "Happy Birthday" stretched across the fence. And there, in the center of it all, was a beautiful cake with my name on it, surrounded by candles that flickered in the gentle California breeze. I stood frozen, taking it all in. My children were running around with their friends, laughing and playing. My neighbors were chatting and eating, their faces relaxed and happy. And my husband was standing by the cake, waiting for me, a nervous smile on his face. He walked over and took my hands. "I know you said you didn't want this," he said, his voice soft and full of love. "But I also know you needed it. You've been hiding for too long. And I wanted to show you that you have a community here. You have people who care about you." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears streaming down my face for what felt like the 1,000th time that day. But this time, I wasn't embarrassed. This time, I wasn't trying to hide. I just let myself feel it. All of it. The love. The gratitude. The overwhelming realization that I was not alone. Sarah came over and hugged me. "Happy birthday, my friend," she whispered. "You deserve this." Jennifer handed me a glass of champagne. Lisa from work was there, waving at me from across the yard. Even Mark, my coworker who barely spoke to me, had come. They had all come. For me. I finally found my voice. "Thank you," I said, looking around at all these beautiful faces. "Thank you all. I don't even know what to say. I spent so many years thinking I didn't matter. That I was invisible. That no one would ever care about me. And today, you've shown me that everything I believed was wrong." My husband put his arm around me. "We see you," he said. "We've always seen you. You just weren't looking." And in that moment, everything changed. I realized that I had spent so much time looking at my flaws, my mistakes, my broken English, that I had completely missed the people who were right in front of me. The people who didn't care about my accent or my grammar. The people who just wanted to know me. The people who had been waiting for me to stop hiding so they could love me. The party continued late into the night. There was music, dancing, laughter, and more food than we could possibly eat. And at the end of the night, when everyone had gone home and my children were asleep in their beds, my husband and I sat on the porch, looking up at the stars. And he said something that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Something that would complete the transformation that had started that morning. Something that would teach me the ultimate lesson about celebrations, about love, and about why I had been so wrong to push them away. Learning to accept love. Have you ever received something so beautiful that you wanted to push it away? Not because you didn't want it, but because you didn't feel worthy of it? Because somewhere deep inside, you believed that you didn't deserve kindness, that you didn't deserve love, that you didn't deserve to be celebrated? That was me, standing in my own backyard, surrounded by people who came to celebrate me, and feeling like I wanted to run and hide. The party was in full swing. The backyard was filled with the sound of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the chatter of people who had taken time out of their busy lives to be here. For me, a woman who had spent 3 years hiding, 3 years believing she didn't matter, 3 years convinced that she was invisible. And now, here they were. Sarah was there, and Jennifer, and Lisa, and Mark, and several other neighbors I barely knew. They had all come to celebrate my birthday. My birthday. A day that I had always tried to pretend didn't exist. I felt like I was watching the scene from outside my body, like it wasn't real. Like I was dreaming. Because in my mind, I had always told myself that birthday parties were for people who had friends, for people who were liked, for people who belonged. And I had spent so many years believing I was none of those things that I didn't know how to accept being all of them. I stood in the corner, holding a cup of punch, watching everyone have fun. My husband noticed me standing alone and came over. "Are you okay?" he asked, his eyes filled with concern. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. Because if I opened my mouth, I was going to cry. And then, he did something that broke me completely. He took my hand, led me to the center of the yard, and said to everyone, "I want to say something. My wife has been through so much. She came to this country not knowing anyone, not knowing the language, not knowing if she would ever belong. And she has been so brave. So incredibly brave. And I want everyone here to know that I am so proud of her. Everyone clapped. Sarah came over and hugged me. Jennifer hugged me. Even the neighbors I barely knew came up and said happy birthday. And I realized something that I had never realized before. I didn't have to be perfect to be loved. I didn't have to have perfect English to be celebrated. I didn't have to be anything other than myself. Because the people in this yard weren't here because I was perfect. They were here because I was me. And that was enough. In that moment, I finally let myself accept the love that had been offered to me. I stopped pushing it away. I stopped believing I didn't deserve it. I just let myself be celebrated. And it felt incredible. But the night wasn't over yet. Because just when I thought I had experienced all the surprises I could handle, my husband called everyone's attention again. He had one more thing to say. And what he said made my heart stop completely. The meaning of celebrations. What if I told you that the most important thing about a celebration isn't the cake, the decorations, or the presents? What if the real gift is something you can't see, something you can't touch? Something that exists only in the space between people when they come together to say, "You matter"? That was the realization that hit me like a wave as I stood in my backyard, surrounded by my community. And finally understood why celebrations had always mattered more than I wanted to admit. I found myself standing near the dessert table, watching the party unfold around me. My children were running around with sparklers, their faces lit up with joy. My husband was laughing with Mark, talking about something I couldn't hear. Sarah and Jennifer were deep in conversation, their heads bent together like old friends. And I felt this overwhelming sense of peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from everything being perfect. The kind of peace that comes from realizing that everything is exactly as it should be. I thought back to all the years I had spent pretending I didn't care about my birthday. All the years I had convinced myself that celebrations were silly, that they were for children, that I was too old and too busy for such things. And I realized that I had been lying to myself. Not because I didn't want to celebrate, but because I was terrified of what it would mean if no one showed up. If no one remembered. If no one cared. I had been so scared of the pain of being forgotten that I had pushed away the possibility of being loved. I had rejected celebrations before they could reject me. I had built walls so high that I couldn't even see the people who were trying to climb over them. But tonight, my husband had torn those walls down. Not by force. By love. He had reached out to my coworkers, my neighbors, everyone he could think of, and he had said, "My wife needs to know she matters. Will you help me show her?" And they had said yes. Every single one of them. Not because they were obligated, but because they wanted to. Because they cared. And that, I realized, was the true meaning of celebrations. They aren't about the cake or the decorations or the presents. They're about connection. They're about community. They're about telling someone, "I see you. I value you. You are not alone." I walked over to my husband and wrapped my arms around him. Thank you, I whispered, tears streaming down my face for what felt like the 100th time that day. Thank you for not giving up on me. He hugged me back tightly. I will never give up on you, he said. That's what love is. That's what marriage is. That's what family is. We don't give up on each other. In that moment, I realized that I had been so focused on my broken English, my cultural differences, my feelings of not belonging, that I had completely missed the fact that I already had everything I needed. I had a husband who loved me unconditionally. I had children who looked up to me. I had neighbors who cared about me. I had coworkers who celebrated me. I had a community. I had a home. And I had finally learned to accept it. But the biggest lesson was still to come. Because as the party wound down and the guests began to leave, my daughter tugged on my sleeve and asked a question that would change the way I saw everything. From isolation to connection. What if the thing you feared the most was actually the thing you needed the most? What if the walls you built to protect yourself were the very things keeping you from the love, the connection, and the belonging you desperately craved? That was the question that echoed in my mind as I watched the last guests leave my birthday party. Feeling like I had just woken up from a dream and discovered that the dream was actually my real life. The party was over. The string lights were still twinkling, the remnants of cake were scattered on the table, and my children were fast asleep in their beds. My husband and I sat on the porch, the cool California night air wrapping around us like a gentle embrace. I leaned my head on his shoulder and said, I can't believe this happened. I can't believe all those people came. For me. He kissed the top of my head and said, they came because they wanted to. Because you're worth celebrating. You always have been. You just couldn't see it. And he was right. I hadn't seen it. I had been so focused on what I didn't have, perfect English, a large family, a sense of belonging, that I had completely missed what I did have. A husband who loved me unconditionally. Children who adored me. Neighbors who cared. Coworkers who saw me. A community that was waiting for me to stop hiding so they could welcome me home. I realized that the biggest obstacle to my happiness wasn't my English. It wasn't my cultural differences. It wasn't America. It was me. I had been my own worst enemy. I had been the one telling myself I didn't belong. I had been the one pushing people away. I had been the one building walls so high that I couldn't even see the people on the other side, desperately trying to reach me. But not anymore. That birthday party had changed everything. It had shown me that I was not invisible. It had shown me that I was not alone. It had shown me that I was loved. And once you know that, once you truly know that in your bones, you can't go back to the way things were. You can't unsee the love that was always there. You can't unfeel the connection that was always waiting. You can't unknow that you matter. From that day forward, I made a commitment to myself. I would stop hiding. I would stop pretending I didn't need anyone. I would stop letting my fear of rejection prevent me from experiencing love. I would show up. For my coworkers. For my neighbors. For my family. For myself. I started small. I said yes to coffee with a coworker. I invited Sarah over for tea. I started attending neighborhood gatherings instead of making excuses to stay home. And slowly, my life began to transform. The isolation I had felt for so long began to fade. The loneliness that had been my constant companion began to loosen its grip. And in its place, something beautiful began to grow. Connection. Community. Belonging. But the most beautiful surprise was yet to come. Because a few weeks after my birthday, my daughter came to me with a drawing she had made. And when I saw what she had drawn, I realized that the transformation wasn't just happening in me. It was happening in my children too. Celebrations always matter. What if the most important lesson you ever learned came from a child's drawing? What if the key to understanding everything, love, belonging, connection, and why celebrations truly matter, was right there in front of you? Drawn in crayon by little hands that saw the world more clearly than you ever could? That's exactly what happened when my daughter showed me the picture she had made, and I realized that my transformation wasn't just about me anymore. It was a few weeks after my birthday party. Life had returned to normal, but I was different. I was lighter. I was happier. I was more present. I stopped hiding in my house and started connecting with my community. I said yes to coffee invitations, joined neighborhood gatherings, and actually talked to people instead of just waving from a distance. But the most beautiful surprise came on a quiet Saturday afternoon, when my daughter ran up to me with a piece of paper in her hands. "Mommy, look what I drew," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I took the paper and looked at it. And what I saw made my heart stop. It was a drawing of our family. My husband, me, my daughter, and my son. We were all standing in our backyard, surrounded by string lights and balloons. And above our heads, in big, colorful letters, she had written, "Happy birthday, Mommy." I stared at the drawing, tears streaming down my face. It was just a child's drawing. It wasn't perfect. The colors were messy. The people looked like stick figures. But it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Because it showed me something profound. My daughter had been watching me. She had seen the party. She had seen the joy. She had seen the love. And she had absorbed it all, internalized it, and turned it into this beautiful piece of art. I knelt down and hugged her tightly. "This is the best birthday present I have ever received," I whispered. She looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes and said, "Mommy, I like when you're happy. You look so pretty when you're happy." And in that moment, I realized the truth about celebrations. They aren't selfish. They aren't silly. They aren't just for children. They are essential. They are how we show the people we love that they matter. They are how we create memories that last a lifetime. They are how we teach our children what love looks like. My daughter had learned something that day. She had learned that her mother was worth celebrating. She had learned that community was important. She had learned that love was something you showed, not just something you felt. And that lesson would stay with her for the rest of her life. I stood up, looked around at my house, my family, my life. I thought about all the years I had spent hiding, pretending I didn't care, convinced I didn't matter. And I realized that I had been wrong about everything. Celebrations do matter. They matter because they remind us that we are not alone. They matter because they connect us to the people who love us. They matter because they teach our children that they are worthy of love. And they matter because they give us the courage to keep going, even when life feels hard. So today, I want to say this to you. If you've been hiding, stop. If you've been pretending you don't care, stop. If you've been telling yourself you don't matter, stop. You do matter. And you deserve to be celebrated. Not because you're perfect, but because you're you. And that is more than enough.